好，特别感谢大家又来参加今天的故事会。我是菲菲，对，相信就是对经常来参加故事会的人的话，我已经不太陌生我了。我的话呢是 Tableau 客户成功部门的我是来自于 Tableau 客户成功部门。那么我呢是人在新加坡。今天的话呢，我们有幸的然后来请到另外的一个 Tableau 的 Zen Master Kevin，然后来帮我们去分享。那么对于今天的，我想跟大家介绍一下我们 Customer Success 都做什么，客户成功。那我们做的话呢，就是帮助 Blueprint，然后呢，帮助企业呢通过 Blueprint，然后来去增强还有辅助实现一个数据化的一个转型，还有就是说使用将 Tableau 的话呢，它的一个价值来发挥到最大。对不起。那么首先开始之前的话呢，我是想感谢一下我们 Tableau Zen Master 的一个 community 哈。那么，我们其实今年如果说是大家来参加了故事会已经几期了以后的话呢，我们最开始的时候今年有我们就是说会中文的Alex Zen Master Alex，然后他做的一个就是有生命力的如何做一个有生命力的仪表盘。那么感谢 Tuan 呢，他已经来了Tableau 故事会2次了。那么今天的话呢，我们就邀请到 Kevin。那么 Kevin 的话呢，我是想跟就是说大家说一下哈。我相信，如果说是各位在 Tableau Community 或者说是 Tableau Public 比较熟悉的话呢，他有一个哥哥，今天他有一个弟弟，对，今天的话跟他讲一下，他实际是哥哥，比Ken 的话呢要提前15分钟出生。我最开始的话呢，也不知道他的姓叫什么，所以大家可以去从他的那个 Tableau website，他的那个 Tableau 的那个就是Team Brother 这个 link 里面看一下，有不同语言的发音。所以今天的话呢，我用英文就是 Kevin Flaherlidge，is that correct? Yes。然后呢，他主要是有15年的一个数据分析的经验。那么最重要的话呢，他实际就是对数据非常非常的爱好。那么他的话呢是Tableau Public 的 Ambassador，然后呢，在我们那个 Tableau，大家都知道我们在 TC Conference 的话会有一个RMVs 前10名，那么这个的话呢，他应该是拿过几次了。另外的话呢，他还是 Tableau Public 的第2位的受欢迎的作者。那么这样的话呢，那今天我就把时间交给 Kevin 然后让 Kevin 的话呢来去介绍他禅级的一个分享。Okay, Kevin, I'm going to pass my presentation to you.
Okay.
Okay, so just to let you know, I have introduced you. You are the elder brother. And your experience.
Good.
Yeah,
All right.
all good to go. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it very much. Thank you all for having me. You did a really great job of introducing me, I assume. So my name is Kevin Flaherlidge. I'm a senior analyst and Tableau developer at a company in Cincinnati, Ohio called Unifund. It's led by a 5-time Zen Master, Jeffrey Schaefer, who literally knows everything about Tableau. He's incredible. Great guy, too. And as you just saw, I'm an identical twin. This is me on the left, Ken, my brother Ken on the right. You see his shirt. He is a Tableau Zen Master. He's been using Tableau for about 5 years. And I've been using Tableau for about 3 years. He got me using it. He's a 3-time Zen Master, and I'm finishing up my first year as a Tableau Zen Master. We're the identical twin Zen Masters and the only 2 family members that have ever held that role. Zen Master is a real thing. It's nominated by Tableau community and selected by Tableau, and there's currently 42 of them in the world. So very cool honor. And as you just saw, I am older, but he is smarter. He's an incredibly brilliant guy, and he gets the edge on the smarts. We don't have to go through all this. You kind of just went through all this, so I appreciate the wonderful introduction. So let's get to it. So most of my presentations, and probably a lot of the presentations that you guys have seen in the past, are pretty much technical or how-to in nature. I've done lots of presentations on fixed LODs or new features is something that I talk about a lot. Dashboard action, spatial analysis, People talk about Tableau prep a lot. Inevitably, one of the questions that always come up is, what about design? And it's really kind of this hard thing to teach. When my brother and I were young, so I'm 44, but when we were about 10 years old, we used to sit there and draw all the time. It's all we did. We would draw. That's a drawing. Ken did the Grinch on the left, and I did Pinocchio on the right. We would spend 5, 6, 7 hours in a row just drawing pictures, and it was really our favorite thing to do. And inevitably, we got the same sort of question: how do you draw like that? And I never knew how to tell people that. It's really hard to teach somebody to draw. So I really think that design and data visualization, especially in Tableau, is similar to drawing. It's this kind of tough thing to learn how to do. I think it takes some natural talent, some training, some practice. I think it's really important that we emulate others, that we see what others are doing and kind of copy those designs or that style. There's a quote from a guy named Paul Rand, and he says, design can be art, it can be aesthetics. Design is so simple, that's why it's so complicated. So today, the goal is to make design simple. We're going to go through about 26 different examples. So we're going to kind of just go through one after another, and it'll feel like we're just kind of listing things off. But I think it'll be beneficial in the end. We're going to show an example of what I would consider bad design and what I would consider good design. And they'll be the same charts, just shown in a little bit different way. These are kind of guardrails. They're not hard rules. There's always times when we break the rules. And as Andy Cotgrave, it really just depends. But in general, these are some good guidelines for your day-to-day data vision work. So here's just a quick example to kind of get us level set. We'll have an example of bad design. That's my brother. And good design, me. See, the whole crowd is probably cracking up right now. I can't tell. So terrible joke. That's a total dad joke. All right. So my definition of design is going to be really used loosely. So we're going to talk mainly today about best practices. I talk about design because a lot of it is really just in the design and how we use different aspects of color and layout and alignment, or, grid lines, how we use size and white space. And sometimes we're going to build charts that are good best practices and look really nice as well. We want our data visualizations, our dashboards, to be attractive to help encourage users to actually use them. So somebody much rather use something that looks nice versus something that's sloppy looking. I'm not planning on trying to teach everything about design. We're not going to be getting into Adobe Illustrator or anything like that. We're going to be just taking things in Tableau, things that I see done on a regular basis, and we're going to just try to take some simple steps to make it just a little bit better, just to improve the design. This is all available on our website. I don't know if you're able to get to it or not. I will tell you that the Flaherlidge Twins website has been translated. Well, about 30 of our 200 some blog posts have been translated into Chinese by a student here in the States and a group of other people. So you can check it out here. I believe it's being recorded. And you can also, everything that I'm going to talk about today is available at this website as well. All right, so we are going to jump over to Tableau, and we're just going to start walking through some different things. Throw it in presentation. Okay, like I said, there's going to be 26 of these, and I'm going to kind of just run through them. If you have questions, we can certainly address those at the end. And so let's kind of just get to it. So very simple first step is to add a title to your data visualization. This is a common error I see, and without it, we don't really have any idea what this dashboard is about. So very simply added a sales and profit review. This is using Superstore data, and we give our users a quick idea of what the dashboard is related to. It's related to sales and it's related to profit. So one very simple step, just make sure you give your data viz a title. All right, grid lines. Grid lines can be really useful, but we don't want them to become the star of the show. We don't want them to distract our users. So here's our bad side. Here's our little red thumbs down. In this case, we have sales by subcategory using the Superstore data set, and we have all these grid lines. We have dark vertical grid lines, dark horizontal grid lines. We have them every $20,000. And if you're like me, all you can see are these grid lines. It's very, very distracting. And frankly, it doesn't look very nice. So what we don't want is the grid lines to kind of take over. So what I always suggest with grid lines is that they become the background of your data visualization. They can be there to help guide the user. I don't have to add labels if I have grid lines and I have an axis, but we don't want it to kind of take over. So in this case, we had grid lines horizontally and vertically every $20,000. And this here, I broke it down. I showed grid lines every $50,000. So we have more than half, or less than half of the grid lines. And I got rid of these horizontal grid lines. So we don't need them. We have bars kind of guiding our eye as we did already. And then what I typically do is make them a really light gray and make them a dotted line. That works for me. It doesn't work for everybody, but you can see that this is helping us understand the chart, but it's kind of brought to the background and it's not taking over our visualization. So I think most people would agree this looks a lot nicer than this, and it's a lot less distracting than this is. Hex maps. For us in the United States, we use hex maps a lot. And the reason we do that is the size of each state in the US is very different, and the population is very different. So if we look at something like Montana, I wish I had a normal map. Montana is a huge state as far as size goes. New Jersey is a very small state in size, but New Jersey has 8 times the population of Montana. But when we plot a map and we show the actual states by area, by their actual land mass, Montana kind of takes over. It's this huge state, and it gives this visual weight to Montana and makes it look like it's more important than other smaller states. So because of that, we use hex maps a lot. And if you're curious about how hex maps work, I have a blog post here. You can read all about kind of the history of hex maps. They have hex maps for all kinds of different areas. I've seen them for Africa. I've seen them for Europe. So it's not just isolated to the States. But one of the things that I see, really, I have 3 different problems that I see with hex maps often is first is the type of shape that they use. So a hex map is built it's like a scatter plot. It's just X and Y coordinates. There's an X and Y coordinate for every state. And we use these hex maps, and they fit in these hex shapes, and they fit together really, really nicely. You can see we kind of have what I would call a vertically oriented hex shape. It's kind of pointing up and down. A lot of people, I've seen this a number of times, use a hex shape that's pointed left and right, that goes east and west. And the problem with that is they don't tessellate is the word that I often use. They don't fit nicely together. We have these kind of odd spaces. So if you're going to build a hex map, make sure that you're using the right hex shape that fits the coordinates that were built for it. For a US hex map, it's a vertically oriented shape. And if you just look at the two, you can tell this looks a lot nicer. A couple other issues I see with hex maps a lot is that a lot of people have all this extra space. What I always tell users to make the shape as large as possible without overlapping. Have some little bit of space in between all the way around, and it'll just it'll be a lot easier to read. It'll look a little nicer. There's something weird in Tableau when you have these real small shapes that the labels don't even line up. You can see these kind of are off to the side, not in the center. So try and make it as big, the hex shapes as big as you can without overlapping. And kind of similarly with hex maps, try and have equivalent spacing all the way around. Here, we have less space vertically than we do horizontally. It looks squished, it looks sloppy, it looks unpolished. And so, yeah, just try and make the spacing all the way around the same. All right, so that's 3 little things on hex maps. So when I first started at my company about two and a half years ago, like I mentioned, I was working at that time with a 3-time Tableau Zen Master, and he teaches data visualization, and he's been doing it for 8 or 9 years, and he's just really, really smart. But one of the things he drilled into my mind, I was this Excel user. I used to use Excel, and they love to have these sort of rotated text up and down, or these at these weird angles. And he drove this into my head. He never wants to see rotated text or vertical text in his in our dashboards. And the reason why is because I almost have to turn my head like this to actually read those labels. They're really, really difficult to read. So one of the solutions to that is to just abbreviate a year. So in this case, or a month, excuse me. I've got March 2017 through December 2018. And what I've done is I've abbreviated the month to just one letter. We could, if we have more space, we could use 3 letters if we wanted, MAR instead of M. And then I've added an additional blue pill when I built the viz to show the year at the top. So we have the year here, and we have March, April, May, and we can quickly see what the month and year is. It's much more legible than having to turn our heads and look at it this way. So it's a pretty hard rule in my company. We avoid rotated text almost always. Occasionally we'll use it in one of the axes, but we almost always avoid rotated text just because it's so difficult to read. This is something that people, other data viz experts talk about, and it's all about these floating bars. I would call these floating bars. They don't have any sort of axis or anchor. They're not sitting on anything. They're just sort of floating out. So we always recommend that we give our bars a basis to sit on, a strong foundation. So all we do is add an axis ruler in here. We're just adding an axis ruler. These bars come meet that axis ruler. They're all starting at the same point. It's really easy and clean view of that. Ryan Sleeper has a great blog post on this, and it's just called Beautiful Bar Charts. It's his most popular blog post on his website. And if you don't know Ryan Sleeper, the guy's amazing. He's amazing. I encourage you to read that blog post, but he really talks about just making your bars beautiful. And one of the key elements of that is using an axis ruler to give it a base. Common problem I see, especially in new users, is using categorical colors. So here we're looking at kind of like what we were looking at before. We were looking at sales by subcategory. And in this case, we've added a subcategory to the color card. So every subcategory has a different color. So this isn't so bad. I think we can kind of understand it. But one of the problems about this, and there's all kinds of different studies about this, is when you add color, you make your user have to try to interpret what that color means. So I'm looking at this bar chart, and as a user, I'm trying to understand what the color means. Are these yellow colors corresponding to in some way? Are these green colors corresponding in some way? And so the user basically wastes their time trying to figure out what the color means. In this case, it's basically meaningless. The color, all it does is represent a subcategory, and we have the bars clearly marked and labeled with the subcategory. So color in this case is, for the most part, useless. Typically what I would say is just remove the color. I like to make my bars gray most of the time, unless I'm matching up with another color. And then I may use one color to highlight a certain subcategory. But generally we can pull the color, and we try to avoid using color just to use color. We want to use it with a purpose. Now, speaking of color, it's very important to design your data visualizations with color deficiency in mind. If you're not aware, about 10% of the male population specifically is colorblind. My dad is actually colorblind. He cannot tell the difference between red and green. And many of us have probably heard that we need to be careful when adding red and green to a dashboard. Tableau used to have red and green as default colors, but now they've changed it to orange and blue. And the reason for that is color deficiency. So red and green are very common, but there's many other things, many other color combinations that are difficult for people with color blindness to interpret. So for me, we can see these, this is a scatter plot, and we're looking at GDP per capita versus ease of business, and these are all countries, and and some of these countries are brown, some of them are red. It's easy for me to tell the difference between these, but somebody with red-green color blindness, it could be very, very difficult. So there are several different color simulators. If you click up here, you can actually go to one of them. What you can do is upload your image, and it'll show you the view from somebody with colorblind, with some sort of color deficiency. I'll click this to simulate it. It's a little bit small, but here's normal vision. You can see those reds and browns. And then you can see somebody with the most common form of colorblindness. And you can see all these, for me, all these look brown. You can't tell the difference between the red and the brown. In this case, where I use Tableau's default colors of orange and blue, they look almost identical to somebody with Deuteronomy. I can't pronounce that word. I'm not even going to try. With the most common form of color blindness. So very important to make sure your data visualizations pass the colorblind test. Again, all you need to do is take a screenshot, upload it to this website, and it'll show you what it looks like for people with color blindness. If you want the full breakdown, just a really intense read on color blindness, you can go to Jeff Schaefer, who I mentioned, who I work for. He has a breakdown on color, and he just goes into a ton of detail on the problems with color and how you design for people with color deficiencies. These next two are kind of tied together. When I originally started writing this blog post that led into this presentation, it was designed to be my Kevin's Tableau pet peeves, things that I saw that didn't make sense to me that I thought people should change. This is one of them. It's a highlight table where people tend to try to fill the space. So this is the bad one up here in red, and it's a highlight table looking at by month and by day, and I don't even know what this value shows, maybe orders or something like that. And what I found, especially I watch a lot of the Makeover Monday reviews, people tend to stretch these things out for whatever reason. I have no idea why. And there's no reason to feel like you need to fill the space. White space is fine. And with this kind of stretched highlight table, it's actually harder to compare the values. It's harder for me to compare Sunday in January versus a Saturday in December because they're so far apart. So when I design a highlight table, I tell people just to make it almost square. Make those boxes almost square if you are able to. Sometimes the numbers are bigger and they can't be square, but don't worry about filling the space. White space is perfectly fine. This is kind of where they're squared off. It's a lot easier to compare Sunday in January versus December and Saturday in December in this smaller chart than it is in this big wide chart. And this goes along the same lines. Don't extend your bar charts to be the whole page. It's unnecessary. It provides no value. We can compare these bars much more easily than these bars because they fit in the space and I can see them without moving my head back and forth. So kind of along the same lines, we don't need to extend our bars unnecessarily. All right, stacked bars. I actually have a little bit of a problem on my good side, and I'll address that here momentarily. So stacked bars are good in a lot of ways and really bad in a lot of other ways. So if we looked at this stacked bar chart, we're looking at sales by quarter, and we've got a subcategory on color. So I can quickly look at this bar, and I can quickly see that the 2018 Q4 had the highest in sales, followed by Q3 2018. It's very easy for me to tell the total. I can easily tell sales by quarter. I can also easily tell the difference between and easily compare over quarters the differences in bookcases. The bookcases are along the axis, and I can easily tell, check that Q3 2016 had the highest sales of bookcases across any of the quarters. But that's where it ends. If I wanted to start looking at binders or appliances or accessories, it's really difficult to make these comparisons. Is this value larger than this value? Is this value, are these values the same? The problem is I don't have them starting at the singular point. They're all starting at these jagged starting points, and it's really hard for me to compare these when they're kind of layered in like bricks. So a couple of different suggestions that I have when building a chart like that is, number one, you can break them out. So in this case, I've broken out, instead of putting color on the bar and making a stacked bar chart, I just put a subcategory on rows or on columns, and it breaks it out into these columns. And we can easily compare accessories, we can easily compare appliances, and we can easily compare the other two categories, subcategories. The problem with this, and I wish I would have fixed it, but I never did, is I can't compare the total very well. So this has its own problem. So really what I should have out here is another bar that shows a grand total. And then we can kind of get all the different aspects all in one chart. It does take up a little bit more space, but we can compare all the different subcategories and the total at the same time. Now, my favorite technique is by Ryan Sleeper. And Ryan Sleeper talks about how you can use a stacked, go back to Tableau, how you can use a stacked bar, but you can reorder the stacks, the different colors, so that you can easily compare them. Let me go back to this. So he uses actually a set action. You can use a parameter action if you like. And what he does is he sends that value to a set as a user clicks on it, and that sends that, resorts that value to the axis. So if he clicks on, I think I'll do it again. So he clicks on south, it sends south to the axis, and now he can compare the south. He clicks on central as well. Now he can compare both the central and the south categories together. So he's using a set action to do that, and it allows you to compare any of those categories at any given time. A really cool way to do a very, very handy, useful stacked bar chart. So really cool method there. All right, God, I jumped ahead of myself. All right, pie charts are sort of this thing that's often talked about negatively in the data visualization industry. I think pie charts have some good use cases. I think they have some really bad ones. So on the left, I've got a pie chart and a donut chart, and I've got, I think, every subcategory in there. And, well, it's really, really difficult to see what's going on. There's no labels, first off, so it's hard I almost have to hover to see them. If I had labels, there'd be labels sticking out all over the place. It's really difficult to compare these. I can't tell if this is the same size as this. It's really, really difficult to get any sort of precision. So I always recommend to never use a pie chart if you have more than 3 slices to that pie chart. In this case, I have 2 slices, and I think just because we're used to looking at a clock or eating a pizza or a pie, we can really understand that this is about a quarter, so this is probably in the neighborhood of 20%. So I'm perfectly fine with using a pie chart when it's used in 2 slices or sometimes 3. I will tell you, at my office, we're a fairly small company, but we have about 800 dashboards on our Tableau server, even though we're a small company, and we don't have a single pie chart in the entire thing. So my advice outside of reducing the number of slices for a pie would be to just make it a bar chart. A bar chart is almost always a better chart to show the percentages than a pie chart. But I don't mind the pie chart. This is something that people will argue about, but I'm not going to argue if this type of chart should be used at work. It probably shouldn't, but I'm not going to argue that point. And then there's also another type of chart called a waffle chart, which is basically just a 100 square grid to show a percentage. Anytime you're using a radial chart like this or a waffle chart, my ask is for accuracy's sake and for aesthetics, for how it looks, is don't squish it. On the left, we've squished this chart. Excuse me. We've squished this chart, and it's this weird oval, and it just kind of looks ugly. But one of the things that's it causes a problem is that these segments here are actually longer than these segments. So it's hard to interpret this chart. It's probably hard to interpret this chart anyways because it's a radio chart. But in general, this segment's shorter than this, and it's hard to actually make those comparisons. So this case, I've got a 1-to-1 ratio, so a 1-to-1 aspect ratio. So it's a perfect circle, and it's much easier to make these comparisons. The same goes with a waffle chart. If you're using a waffle chart, it's much nicer looking if you make it a 1-to-1 ratio. So the squares are squares and not rectangles, and you have this perfect square for showing your percentage. All right, so that was 14 different things, and we are, let me see what time. I'm going to take a quick drink. We're about 30 minutes in. I'm going to take, it feels like a lot of information, so I'm going to take just a quick break, talk about something that's kind of near and dear to my heart. I don't know how many people in the group are using Tableau Public. For me, Tableau Public was a way to learn the software. You know, it's free software, and you just have to publish it up to their public server. I used Tableau Public for 6 months, and then I built this kind of repository of data visualizations that I did just in my free time because I wanted to learn the software. And I had 6 months in, I had somebody call me up and say, how'd you like to do this for a living? And it's literally changed my life. But if you like data visualization and you like art, Tableau Public has some of the coolest things I've ever seen. This is one of the first visualizations I've ever seen, and an analysis of the Beatles. Just gorgeous. I mean, this is all done in Tableau, just amazing work. And there's lots of other cool things. So if you're not on Tableau Public, I'd really recommend getting on there, following people. You can follow me if you want, and then follow some of the people I'm following. You can just see some really amazing works of art. They can inspire you. You see new techniques. You'll see people post visualizations that go along with blog posts. So it's a really great way to improve your learning. And if you don't know, I gotta find it. Where did I put it? I have something called a Tableau chart catalog, but I was lucky enough to have somebody actually translate this for me. I'm blanking on the name right now, but she works for Tableau, and she translated the Tableau chart catalog into Chinese. This is 100 different chart types by 74 different authors. These are things on Tableau Public that you can go directly to. If you click on the little icon, it's going to refresh on me. If you click on the icon, it'll go to that data visualization. You can download the workbook, and you can kind of see how it's put together. So lots of people use this as inspiration, or just kind of a chart selector when they're looking for a chart in their work, in their business. So anyways, you can go check that out. And like I said, it's completely, Amber Zhang translated that for me. So appreciate that. All righty. That was my little break, and we're going to move along here, and we're going to jump right into labeling. Sometimes I think people tend to want to label their charts because they think they're giving their users more information. They're making that chart easier to read. In this case, we've got 2 years worth of data, and I've labeled every single point. So there's 24 different labels on here. And I think most people would agree it looks incredibly cluttered. It's really hard to read because there's labels all over the place. You can't tell where the labels go with. On top of having labels, we have an axis here. So we really probably don't need labels at all. Ryan Sleeper talks about this. I talk about this a lot as well, is try and declutter your data visualizations. You don't need all this stuff. It doesn't make it easier to read. So in this case, I do have an axis. I probably don't need any labels whatsoever. But if I were going to label a chart, I tend to use 2 labels. I like to label the beginning and end, the end of the lines, or use a min and the max. So min and the max, it would be labeled here and a label here, so we can kind of see the range. But in general, if I have an axis, I probably don't need them at all, because it's very easy to see that this number is around $80,000. So, but if you're going to use labels, just use them sparingly. Don't clutter your visualization with labels. All right, icons. Icons are something that I use in visualizations quite often. It gives a little sense of design, makes your things look kind of nice. Also gives information, very quick information to users. We build data visualizations for quick insights. We use bars instead of numbers in a spreadsheet, so they can quickly see the differences. It's the same way when we're providing an icon versus a word. If we're talking about bowling or boxing or soccer, we can quickly see these images and instantly recognize that versus spelling it out. So I do like to use icons in my work. Now, if you're going to use icons, I would suggest that you use icons that look similar. If you ever heard of Chantilly Jagannath, she's a fellow Tableau Zen Master. She's like 26 years old and completely brilliant. I'm very jealous of her drive and her brain, but she has a long design presentation that she did at the Tableau conference in 2019, and she really spent like 20 minutes talking about icons. In this case, you can see, and so here's a link to that if you're interested. You can see here we have these icons. You can tell what they are, but they're very inconsistent. This one's an outline icon. This one's sort of this cartoon-looking icon, and this is sort of the sketch drawing icon. They look bad. And in this case, we have a really, really similar design for all our icons. I use a website called the Noun Project. It's fairly cheap annually, and you can download icons from there. I think I spend $40 a year for icons. And you can download icons from icon groups and icon families. So I downloaded these icons from one artist, and they're very, very consistent. They all have the same exact design. So if you're going to use icons, I suggest that you use icons of the same family, the same style. If they're outlines, use all outlines. If they're filled, use all filled. I did want to jump back to something that I kind of mentioned before, and I kind of forgot to talk about. For some reason, Tableau Public shifts this viz off to the right. I don't know why. This is a visualization that I talked about before, and when I was talking about categorical colors, I talked about not coloring every bar. I think I had subcategory, sales by subcategory, and I put subcategory on color. So every single bar was a different color. As I kind of started off this presentation, that's not always, these are guardrails. It's not always hard and fast rules. So in this visualization is looking at movies and the gross revenues from those movies. In this case, I use color, a different color for every month. And I did that very intentionally because what I wanted to do is kind of bring those colors throughout the entire visualization. So we have these colors by month. And then I scroll down, I see, January is red. I can quickly see that the red dot here is January. I can see December in pink. I can quickly make these correlations throughout the entire visualization. If I scroll down, we see that red January, we see that pink December. They're very easily to tie back throughout the visualization. If we click this, it's going to refresh on me. Sort of. Tableau Public is acting kind of weird at the moment. Let's see if this works. Okay. So now instead of showing it by month, I'm showing it by movie distributor. So again, the same thing. We can see Walt Disney Studios in red, and we can see these big, large bubbles because Walt Disney only puts out about 10 movies a year, but there are these huge movies like Avengers Endgame. So we can kind of see that throughout. This big red bubble, or this big red color, is Disney. So you can use color, categorical colors in a data visualization, but you just need to be careful in how you do it, and it has to be done with purpose. So sorry, I'm kind of jumped around on that one. I just wanted to make sure I brought that point up. All right, maps. One of the common things I see when people use maps in a data viz is they have this background. And if you don't need the background, I suggest you don't use it. So we have, let's say we have a workbook or a dashboard. It's white. It has a white background. And then we get to the map and we have this greenish background with this gray land. We see all of Canada and all of Mexico and the Bahamas. And honestly, we don't need any of it. We're not interested in Mexico or Canada or the Bahamas. We're interested in the United States in this case. So when I can, I recommend that people turn off that base layer in Tableau, and they just have a nice, clean, white background that matches the rest of their data viz. It flows really, really nicely. Now, there are problems with that. If you turn off the base layer and you don't have data from Montana, well, there's going to be a hole there. Or Colorado, there's going to be a hole. So you can't always do this, but I always recommend people that if they're going to use, if they have a map that's pretty filled out, that we can turn that base layer off and just have it match the map or the rest of the visualization. If you have a light background, you can use a light map. If you have a dark background, you can use a dark map. It just makes everything flow much better. Now, if you're going to use, map things, I tend to tell people to use a different projection. So that was using the standard map projection in Tableau, but there's lots of different things. This is for the United States, but I'm sure there's plenty of them for China, but you can use shape files and different things to get different map projections. There's just something about this. Well, first off, this is more accurate in their sizing. Alaska is looks huge on a normal Tableau map, and this it's sized down to its appropriate size, and it has this just nice kind of curvature. It just looks nice. It just sometimes we need to design our visualizations to just look pretty. So this is a visualization that Ken did, and he used a shape file to bring in this different, I think it's a Lambert projection, and it just looks nicer. So any opportunity you have to use a different projection, I would recommend that. Transparency is very important when we're building dashboards. Anytime you have any sort of overlapping marks, you want to make sure that you use transparency. In this left chart, I have a same scatter plot I showed earlier, and I have these marks with 100% opacity, and when the marks are stacked on top of each other, you can't really tell the density. Now, I can see kind of that there's a lot of dots here, but I can't really tell how many there are. If I knock down that opacity just a little bit and provide a little bit of transparency, we can start to see the density of these marks. We can see that there's a lot of marks, a lot of density of marks here and here, and we can kind of tell a little bit more about where these marks appear versus here, where it's just kind of this one big blob of bubbles. I like to make it typically around 70% opacity, and then I like to add a border to kind of separate our marks. I like to use the border the same color as the background. I like, for a white background, I would use white. For a dark background, I would use a darker color. A lot of people like to use a gray or a darker color. They seem to think it separates a little bit better, but for me, I like to use the same color as the background. But you can tell the huge difference in the legibility, how easy it is to read this chart versus how easy it is to read this chart. Very difficult to understand the density in this one. All right, diverging color palettes. So if we just take a look at this map on the left, and this is colored by sales by state. If you look at it quickly, you might see that California is probably the best. It's this dark blue, but all the stuff in between is kind of, if you without staring at this scale, it's kind of hard to understand what it is, which one's better than the other ones. Is this light color better than this dark red? Is this color better than dark red? Like, I can't really understand this scale. And the reason for that is this is a diverging color palette. And a diverging color palette basically means we have this range of values, and in the middle we have, it goes to white. So we have this red color that goes to white and then to blue. And a diverging color palette can be really, really confusing if used the wrong way. So the only time I recommend using a diverging color palette is when there is this natural midpoint to represent this white color. A natural midpoint might be 0. It might be a target, or you may be comparing a value from a previous year. If there's a natural midpoint, then a diverging color palette makes sense, because we have a sense of what this center value means. In this case, it's just some random dollar value. I don't know, a couple $100,000, and it's really difficult to interpret this map. Conversely, if we look at this map, where we have this sequential color palette and just goes from this light blue to this dark blue, we can quickly see, without even looking at the key, we can tell which values are at the end. We can tell that California's got the most sales, and looks like maybe West Virginia has the least sales. So I always tell users to avoid diverging color palettes unless there is a very specific midpoint for those values. Number precision. So number precision really talks about how precise your numbers are. In this case, I'm showing two different numbers in these. I would call them a band, a big number, and we're showing 38.1382%. unless you work for a company that's sending spacecraft to the moon, or you're working in very small numbers, almost, I would probably say 99.5% of users do not need that type of precision in their data visualizations. In fact, 38.1382% is actually kind of hard to read. It doesn't help your user get that information quickly. And it's the same with a big sales value. At my office, $8.7 million is completely sufficient. I do not need to know what the value is down to the dollar. So in this case, for 99% of users, I'd recommend we use maybe 1 decimal point, maybe 0 decimal points, and we kind of round those numbers up. 38.1% is, in my business, plenty of information. I don't need to know the details. Now, if you do want to know the details, if you want to give that user that additional information, one technique that I like to do is to copy this field, make a copy of this field, and we add it to we change the formatting and we add it to the tooltip of this band. I wish I would have done that in this visualization. So what we can do is allow users to hover over the 38.1%, and it'll show more precision. It'll show the 38.138%. And we could hover over this $8.7 million, and it'll show the 8,682,317. So that's a very nice technique to clean up your dashboards, but also give your user the ability to really drill in and get more information if they like. All right, we've got about 15 more minutes. I think we'll get in on time. We talked about color. We talked about categorical colors, and we talked about designing for color deficiency. Color is really, really important in data visualizations. It really helps you call out and show differences throughout a data visualization. Color needs to be used intentionally, but we also need to be very careful on how we use it. On the left, I've got 2 different scatter plots. They're in the same dashboard. And one is looking at profit. They're both looking at profit versus sales. The first one's looking at profit versus sales for corporate versus consumer. Excuse me, I'm gonna take a quick drink. You can see that corporate is yellow and consumer is blue, right? And then we move our eye down to this chart and we see profit versus sales, and we see that same blue and that same yellow color. I up here have pretty much told the user that corporate is yellow and consumer is blue. So when I move down to this chart, I immediately make the assumption that consumer is blue and corporate is yellow. Unfortunately, I've switched it on them. I've made yellow furniture and blue office supplies. This is something that we have to be really careful about, because we can easily make our customer or our users, we can deceive them by making them think that these are corporate consumer when they're really not. So we need to be careful in how we use color. Now, I do think this is okay when it's very clearly labeled. I don't know if a legend's good enough. Maybe if we had a big title that said furniture versus office supplies, and we colored furniture in yellow and the word furniture in yellow and office supplies in blue, maybe we have these big titles that would make it very clear. But I don't think the legends really does enough of the work. And for the most cases, I would recommend using different colors. Now, we don't want to have 30 colors throughout our visualization, so we need to be careful, and maybe sometimes labeling is a better way of doing it. But in this case, where we just have 2 charts, I'm using yellow and blue up here for corporate and consumer, and then I use a pink and a gray for furniture and office supplies. If I'm a user and I'm looking at this, and then I move down to this chart, I'm going to immediately recognize that we're looking at 2 different things than we were looking at before, because we have 2 totally different colors. So good way to separate that information just by showing it in a different color. This is just almost, I guess I kind of talked about this originally starting off as pet peeves. This is kind of a pet peeve of mine. On Tableau Public especially, people build a lot of long dashboards. I know it worked. I build dashboards mainly to fit on a screen, but I know some people build them very long, like a scrolling dashboard. And if you have a map in a scrolling dashboard, and I like to use my mouse wheel to scroll down a visualization if it's long. And if you do that on a map, you can do this. And that's a really unnerving and kind of weird experience. So my recommendation is if you have a map that doesn't require any zooming, this is a map. This is a map of the state of Ohio, which is just north of me. I'm just south of Cincinnati, Ohio, and in this case, it's just calling out a couple of different cities. I have no need to zoom into this map. If I don't have that need, I tell people just turn these map layers off. You can go up to map. Map options, and then just uncheck all the boxes. Then you avoid this sort of weird scrolling and trying to get back to where it was before effect. So this one, I don't have any of the map options on, and you see I'm using my mouse wheel. You probably can't see that, and nothing's happening. So if you can if a map is static and you don't need the zoom ability, make sure you turn those options off. People tend to just leave them on even when they're not needed. I'm obsessive compulsive, and I like every single thing to line up perfectly. And that's, in my personal life as well as in my data visualization life. And if you want a dashboard to really look polished, it's really key that you have your elements aligned. So if we look at this section over here, we can kind of see this axis doesn't align with this axis. This label doesn't align with this label. This axis doesn't align with this axis. These axes here don't line up. Nothing lines up. So this seems like it might be obvious, but this is something I see all the time. So you can, when you're designing a data visualization, I always tell people to design to a grid. You can do this in a couple of different ways. I like to tile most of my dashboards. I don't float things because tiling allows this alignment things to be really easy. So right here, I basically got these in four little quadrant tile, and the elements line up really nicely. These axes line up vertically, they line up horizontally as well. Now, if you're a floater, you can use the layout, and I'll escape here just to show you. If you like to float things, I think that might be floated, you can go over the layout and you can adjust the X and Y coordinates and the width and the height of these different elements, and you can get pixel perfect alignment. If you didn't know, here's a little bit of a trick. If you hit the G character, all you got to do is hit the G character on your keyboard and it'll bring up a grid, and you come up to dashboard grid options, and you can make the grid larger and you can make that grid smaller. And then you hit the G on your keyboard again, that grid will disappear. So you can use that grid to align your elements using the layout, and just make sure that everything is perfectly aligned. It'll really give you a lot of polish to your dashboards. Back to the screen. All right, buttons. This is something that's very near and dear to my heart. Navigation buttons in Tableau, the standard buttons aren't all that pretty, if you ask me. This has changed a little bit, but when I first built this presentation and this visualization, the navigation button, the button that you use to move from one dashboard to another, looked like this. When you drop it in from Tableau, the standard button looks like this. I have a couple problems with this button. First off, I think it's ugly. I don't think it's very nice looking. It's this big block, this squared block, and it's harsh, and I just don't like it. The second thing I don't like about it is it gives your user absolutely no information about what that button is going to do. You can kind of see throughout my visualization, I have these little buttons up at the top, and they're all perfectly labeled. You could tell what you're getting yourself into before you click it. Here, unless there's a tooltip or something like that, it's guessing on where I'm going. So those are the two kind of things I don't like about the standard buttons. If you're using like a show hide container, like a collapsible container, then it's a hamburger menu. It's a 3 lines or an X, and it just doesn't provide much information. I just don't like it. So I always recommend that people build their own buttons. And building buttons is actually like a foreign concept to most people, but it's actually really, really easy. So this is just a custom button that I created in PowerPoint. So I'm actually going to escape from here and jump into PowerPoint and create a new slide. I'm just going to show you how we can quickly create a button in PowerPoint. You can do this in Illustrator, or you can do this in any design tool, but everybody has PowerPoint. Everybody's used to using PowerPoint. So I tend to build them in PowerPoint. So if you go up to Insert, you go to Shapes. I usually pick this sort of rounded rectangle, and I'll drag that out on the canvas here. I usually make it transparent. So if I go up here and go to Fill and go No Fill, and then I'll go up here to Shape Outline. Maybe I'll make it white and then make it maybe a little bit thicker. And then you see this shape selected. There's a little yellow anchor here. You can slide that over and you can kind of round them off. So you can now we kind of have the start of a button. If I just go to Insert Text, this is my button. You can use whatever font you want, whatever. A very nice font. And now I have this button, and now all I have to do is drag and select that whole thing. It'll select all the elements, and then I right-click on that border there, and I can save the picture. Once I save that as a picture, I can come into wrong thing. I can come into Tableau. I can edit that, and I can choose a different image for my button. Now, if you don't want to create buttons yourself, I've tried to do that work for you. I've got this thing in front of me, and I can't seem to get rid of it. Let's see if I can. There it goes. There we go. Oh, now it's back. Sorry, the little control panel is in my way. I'm trying to find where I'm at. All right. So my brother and I went through and had a little bit of fun and created a bunch of custom buttons that you guys can use yourself. This is showing in Tableau all kinds of, just regular buttons that you can click in all kinds of colors and styles with icons. And we also have a bunch of different toggles that you can use. I think you saw one of the toggles I used in the Movie Money Viz. You can come up here to this visualization on my Tableau public profile. You can download the buttons template. It'll download into PowerPoint. Then you can take this button, whatever button you like. You can change the image. You can change the color or the fonts. And you have this nice custom button that you can use in Tableau. So a nice way to really make your visualizations pop, just look much more clean, much more professional. And at the same time, give your users a lot more information about what they're accessing next. All right, two more things to talk about. I like fonts. I feel like there's always this perfect font for a visualization, whether it's for work or for my personal work on Tableau Public. I'm always looking for the perfect font. And some fonts look really clean and crisp, and they look perfect like on a website, and some just don't. There's been a lot of questions about what fonts are safe to use in Tableau. My brother just recently wrote a blog post that was called Demystifying Fonts in Tableau. If you can read this wonderful background of fonts on Tableau, all the history, what's safe, what's not. The truth is there's only one truly safe font to use in Tableau that will render the same way for you as it will for every user across the world, and that font is the Tableau font. That is installed with desktop, it's installed with server, it's installed with Tableau Public. It is installed everywhere that Tableau goes, and it is always safe. It will always render the same way, no matter where you publish it. Unfortunately, most fonts are not like that. In fact, there's no other fonts that are rendered 100% of the time in Tableau. There are some that are rendered 99.5% of the time. What you see here is some custom fonts that I have on my laptop. I created some silly visualizations, and I wanted specific fonts. And so I have these different kind of crazy fonts. So this is what these particular fonts look like on my laptop when I published them to Tableau Public. And then I went over to my home computer where those fonts are not installed. And this is the way these exact same fonts render. So it looks like this to me, but it looks like this to everybody else. I'm not sure what font that is, maybe Times New Roman or something like that. So if you're not using what they call a web-safe font, it's going to render, and your user doesn't have that installed on their computer, it's going to render a little bit differently. I should kind of note you can install custom fonts on Tableau Server if you want, so you can avoid that for all your users. But for the most part, it can be a problem. So there are, like I said, only one truly safe font that's going to render the same way all the time. That's Tableau. But there are other fonts that render about 99.5% of the time. You can count on these 10 or 12 fonts to look the same for you as it will for everybody else. So if you are designing a data visualization for a large group of people, I would highly recommend sticking to this font group. I will tell you that at work, I use exclusively the Tableau font because I know it's always going to look the same. Now, there are some tricks around that. I'm going to jump to Tableau Public again. See if I can click there. This is a data visualization I did in Tableau Public, just having a little bit of fun. I by no means think that doing a radial tornado chart is best practice in any way, but it was more of a mathematical challenge for me. But the point, what I wanted to show is this is not a web-safe font. This is not one of those 10 or 12 fonts. This is Avenir. And what I did was type this text into PowerPoint, kind of like I did the buttons, and I brought it in as an image. So as an example, I could say, if this is my text, I can take that and save it as a picture. And then instead of bringing in text, I can bring it in as an image. In this case, I did that for all these little text boxes. They're all images so that I have a very specific font. That has its issues. If you're going to do that, you want to make sure that, show you if you add the image, you want to make sure that you add alt text, because anybody using a screen reader, if you're just bringing an image, if you don't put any alt text in here, they won't be able to tell what it is. So if I use, say, at my work, I use an image for the title often. So if I have a title that says fonts, I would just type fonts here. So if I could type it right. And so that my screen readers would read that information from that image. So very important to design for accessibility. All right, and the very last one, I'm just over an hour, is white space. White space is very important to help a reader understand how sections are broken out. It can help the flow. It helps the readability. A lot of people tend to want to draw like these lines to section things off. You don't need that most of the time. White space does a really great job of that. So this is a data visualization that I have out on Tableau Public looking at American football. And what I did was take this and remove all the white space. And it looks like this. And you can see, first off, it looks ugly. Second, you can't really see the difference of where one player starts and one player begins. Like, where do I start and end here? Everything runs together. I don't know where to read first. There's no flow to this visualization. But if we take and just add some white spaces between all the different elements, we have this nice flow to the visualization. It's a lot easier for my readers to understand. If you ever want to be inspired by somebody, a great data viz designer that uses white space better than anybody I've ever seen, Pradeep Kumar, it's under Pradeep Kumar G. He's in India and a data visualization professional. Pretty well-known guy, Tableau ambassador, fifth most favorited author on Tableau Public. But you can scroll through his Tableau Public profile, and you can see all his data visualizations have this really great use of white space. Nothing's ever crammed. Really good flow, really easy to read, and beautiful at the same time. So really inspiring work from him. All right, that's all I've got for you. I will be more than happy to take any questions from anybody if they have them.
Thank you so much. Have you just got a chance to read all the Q&As? All the question is, can I get a dashboard? Can I get all the links and your presentations? And also, of course, the recording.
Yeah, so if you can access this website, this has a link to that whole Tableau Public workbook that I walk through. That has a link to that, and it basically guides you through all those different pieces, just like I did verbally. So you can walk through this anytime, and the link is right here. Yeah.
Yep.
That should have everything you need.
Okay, great. So, 所以我 回答了大家所有的问题哈，我们的这个东西的话是可以去分享的。然后呢，那么这个录屏的话呢，我会分享给所有今天过来参加的那个用户。另外的话，我还想麻烦大家一件事情啊，我想就是说，请大家呢做一个就是对故事会所有这个感想哈评价。那么所以就是麻烦大家填一下这个问卷。So Kevin, let's just answer some questions.
Okay.
Yeah, asked by the customer. So, I think I missed one of the question. Oh, so thank you for sharing. It's really great. I appreciate your attitude on the data visualization.
Thank you for the kind words. I love this
Yeah.
stuff. I do it for a living, but I also do it as a hobby. I spend a lot of my time outside of work doing this just to like create and design and also to just learn new techniques. So I appreciate that comes through.
Okay, and then also somebody said you're handsome.
Well, I don't get that every day, but thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, so I believe one of the questions is being asked by the Li about the grid buttons. 伊利，但是我看不到你的问题。您可以我要看 Q&A，稍等一下哈。对不起，let me just check on the Q&A box. I only have 4 questions and all requesting about the presentations. If we can share the presentation. 如果可以的话，可以把你们的问题放在那个就是 chat window 里面嘛，我好像看不到哎，对不起哦。Okay. Kevin, are you able to see the chat? One question pops up from the chat window.
Let's see. I think I have to
Visualization, visuals.
stop sharing to see the chat. Let me see.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. In the chat itself or in the Q&A window?
In the chat itself. So visuals in Tableau Public is very cool. But in what situation should we use this kind of fancy charts? In normal business projects, we always use the simple chart like bar chart, the line chart to make daily and monthly dashboard.
I totally agree with you. I mean, the kind of crazy radial tornado chart that I showed, it was for fun, only for fun. That's I would never use something like that at work. We once looked at our I think our top 30 dashboards by views, and we looked at the percentage of different types of charts that were in each of those dashboards. I think 30% of the charts were bar charts, 25% of the charts were line charts, 15% were maps, and then there was some scatter plots and things like that. We rarely use any of these sort of crazy charts at work. The craziest type of chart we have at work would be a Sankey diagram. We have one of those. So I don't really have a good answer for when we might use them. I agree with you. I use bar charts, line charts, area charts, maps, scatter plots at work. I don't use that kind of crazy stuff. Now, like I said, it's my hobby. So I like to challenge myself to create crazy things. And I like to do math in my spare time. That sounds very weird. And so that's why you see a lot of the odd stuff on my Tableau public page. But I agree, bars and lines, that's what I used to.
All right, thank you. So another question is about your tornado chart.
Okay.
So in which situation you can use tornado chart in business?
Never. Never. Like I said, it's just not. It was built because I thought it would be fun to build, and that is literally the only reason. It's a hard chart. I could actually let me share it real quick, and so we can kind of look at it. Let's see where to go. Right here. This is a really. Let me put it in full screen so we can see it. This is a really difficult chart to interpret because we have unlike a bar chart, we can kind of have this shared axis and we can measure length. We really can't compare this to this. We can't compare these values in this inner ring to this outer ring. And even values that are close to each other are hard to compare because they get this rounded, axis almost. So this was meant to be pretty and artistic and mathematical and nothing more. I would never use the work ever. I hope that explains it.
对，其实那个 Tableau 的话也是一直支持，就是或者说是一直宣扬我们在 business case 的时候，在 business usage 的时候的话呢，我们要去做的简单，然后清楚，只要是能把那个 story 或者是能把那个 insight 把它体现出来，那就 OK 了。那么像Kevin 他做成这种 tornado chart 的话呢，其实就是完全是自己的一个喜欢，因为有很多就是比如说像 Tableau 的 Zen Master 或者很多其他的用户的话呢，他们已经把 Tableau 当成了一种空白的画布，可以在上面发挥自己的想象力来去做他们想去做的东西。对，so we have another question. So could you share where can we find the consistent icons?
Yep, I was just reading that one myself. It's called
Great.
The Noun Project. They have millions of icons, and I just put the website in the chat. There are a few other websites. This is the one I'll use. You can find anything on there. Yeah.
All right. So another question is, in my company, it is hard even to even use scatter plot. Oh yeah, I think this is just just replied, follow up your answers. Yeah, about the tornado chart. And so would you please give some instruction how to improve quickly for freshmen, just for just a few words?
Yeah, I'm gonna go grab a blog post. So sorry, I'm gonna throw that in the chat. I just have to find it real quick. You're gonna hear me. There it is. So my brother wrote a blog post called How to Master 4 Steps for Mastering Tableau, and I just threw it in the chat. This is a question. Ken became a Zen Master after 2 years of using Tableau, and I also became a Zen Master after 2 years using Tableau. I always say my 2 years is more like 4 years because I did so much of it outside of work. But one of the questions we always get is how'd you learn so quickly? So that link I just put in there talks about that. And there's really, in my opinion, 4 different steps. Training, which you could use Tableau's e-learning. I use some Udemy videos. Matt Francis has a Udemy video that's incredible. It has like 9 or 10 hours of content for $12 or something like that. So I use that to learn. So you need to train. I won't go into details the blog post does. You need to practice. I practice on Tableau Public. I practice with, there's a lot of different community projects like Makeover Monday and Sports Viz Sunday and Project Health Viz and all these different community projects that help you practice. One of the other things that I always recommend that people don't understand the importance of is joining the community of Tableau users. Now, you guys have a lot of people on this call, so hopefully you guys are staying in contact with each other and seeing what other people are doing. I tend to try and stay up to date with people on LinkedIn and on other resources to see what blog posts they're posting, what visualizations are they doing, what styles are, what's their design look like, what are the little tricks they're doing. So I try to keep up with that. And even if I don't read a blog post immediately, I at least know that technique exists and I can go find it when I need it. And the last thing I would say is to teach. We always talk about, when you teach, you learn more than the people you're teaching. You can do that in a variety of different ways, presenting or helping others. If you're not aware, the Tableau community forums has the big forums where people can ask questions. You can go in there and answer questions. So those are kind of my 4 tips to really getting quickly learning the software. You can read that blog post. It might be a little bit easier to get all the different details. So You said a few words. I said like 100 words. I'm sorry.
More than 100.
Yeah, like 500.
Yeah. OK， 所以我看到好像还有一个问题的话呢，就是从Coco 吴，然后呢就是说刚才我相信那个 Kevin 的话，他已经回答了一些，就比如说像 self learning 的一些就是建议哈，我觉得如果说是我们有这么多的每一次参加故事的 故事会的人都有100-200的话，我觉得我们真的可以组成一个群了，是不是？这个的话呢，以后可以考虑一下。然后还有另外的话呢，就是说在哪里可以看到Kevin 的 Tableau Public。那么这个的话呢，其实就是在那个在我报名表里面，其实有它 Tableau Public 的 link 你们可以大家去看一下。然后OK, Kevin, this is okay. Have you tried to use the Power BI?
It's funny. I just saw that question. I have never
Yeah.
used Power BI. I've never used it. I've used before. Before using Tableau, I used Excel for 15 years, and that's not even close. And so I can't give you any real good perspective on the differences. I do know several people. A guy named Spencer Balke, I could probably dig it up, has done a lot of different comparisons of Tableau and Power BI. If you search for him, you should be able to find them. But I have no real perspective on that whatsoever. I love Tableau. I don't ever want to use anything else.
去回答这个问题的话呢，我相信大家可以看一下，就是那个在应该是第9期还是第10期，我们有一个吴玉鹏老师他分享的。那么在那个里面的话呢，他说到了，就是 Tableau 的话，实际是真正的是给业务的用户去问的。那么因为我们要先根据问题，然后来去从数据里面去找到答案。但是给 Power BI 的话呢，Power BI 是给 IT 用的。那么它的话呢，是方便 IT 去建模，就是说去建很多的那种图形，然后呢来去试着回答业务的问题。但是在这个时候的话呢，你建了业务的模型以后，因为这些表全部都是或者图形全部都是 IT 去做的，那么 IT 其实并不去了解业务人员他们想要了解的真正的一些目的是什么，那么他们想就是从数据里面拿到的问题是什么。所以这个的话呢，其实是那个就是说最重要的两个区别。那么其他的话呢，我相信我们应该会有一些 Tableau 的那个Tableau versus Power BI， 那么这个的话我也可以找一下，然后给你分享过去。Okay, so I saw some questions from the Q&A as well. Okay. So do you often use the Python to integrate with Tableau?
I do not. No, my brother started out his career as a software programmer. He knows how to use R and Python and write code, and he used to be a DBA, so he's really good at SQL. I had a very different path. I was in analytics and I used Excel, and that's pretty much the tool that I used. And then I got into Tableau. So my use is really strictly Tableau and, some design tools like Illustrator and things like that. But yeah, I don't use Python or R or any of those other tools. I write SQL code and I use Tableau, and that's pretty much all I do.
Okay, I think that's the most of Tableau users are using Tableau for. So another question is, that means there is always a gap between artwork and good data interpretation. And if so, how do you balance the two?
I mean, the first goal is a data visualization is meant to give somebody quick insights. It doesn't always have to be, I should be clear on that. It doesn't always have to be quick insights, but that's generally the intention. I want to be able to make someone using a dashboard, I want to make their job easier. I want them to be able to see problem areas. I want to see outliers, right? So my focus will always be, first and foremost, for it to be a good data visualization that represents the data fairly and accurately. But at the same time, I think there are plenty of things that you can do to make it more visually appealing and easy to understand. And you can do that using some of the design techniques that I talked about today. So first and foremost, I'm never going to let accuracy be, I'm never going to put a design or making something look pretty before the accuracy of the data represented, if that makes sense.
Mm. Yeah. 所以就是我们在刚才您的这个问题的话呢，其实我们在有一期叫王延宁他分享的 Tableau 故事会的第8期叫出 Tableau，大家可以看一下，就是说听一下他的那个分享。那么那个分享的话呢，其实讲了很多，就是说那 Tableau 对真正的 business user 的话，到底是一个什么样的用处哈？So if the raw data is too dirty, we have to use SQL or R to prepare the data for Tableau.
Yeah, it's same here in my business. We have some Alteryx licenses and we have Tableau prep, but generally speaking, my team uses we write our own SQL code to get to the data we need, and then we bring that into Tableau. That's basically our process. Write SQL code, bring it into Tableau. We do use R sometimes. I don't, but some people on my team do. We use Python. We have data scientists that use all these different tools, but generally we use SQL and we get that into Tableau. So I totally agree with you.
Yeah. So can you share some story of Tableau opens the new story tab?
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
Can share some story of Tableau opens the new story tab. 可以，这个问题可以就是说再解释一下吗？我好像有一点不太清楚是什么。Let's wait for the further explanation from this question. So, do you have any advice for the intermediate Tableau user?
Yeah, I think most of the training type courses are more for, I won't say beginners, but they are more geared towards beginners than they are intermediate users. And I think one of the keys is to really ingrain yourself in it. I see so many Tableau users that just do it at work and they do it in their own little box and they don't expand in what they're looking at and what they're seeing and what they're reading. And this kind of comes back to that aspect of community that I talked about. So I think it's really, really key if you're an intermediate user and you want to kind of break out of that and expand, is to engage with community, see what other people are doing, read what other people are writing about, see what kind of cool techniques people are coming up with, look at other people's designs. It's really, for me, it's really watching what other people do I believe will take you to that next level.
So the question is, I would like to know how to use Tableau story function.
It's so funny. I don't use it. And the reason I don't use it is because I started using, well, that's not a good reason, but the reason I don't use story points, and I've literally never used it, so I'm not going to be able to answer this question. I don't use it because Tableau has navigation buttons now, and I feel like that's just much more flexible than the story points. So a navigation button allows you just to click a button and move to the next dashboard. So I use navigation buttons 100% of the time, and I have never used story points, so I won't be able to answer that one.
All right, okay. 所以这个Diana 你的问题的话呢，一会儿我会跟他再要一个那个 link， 然后我会发邮件给你。Okay, I think we don't have any further questions. Kevin, can you please just pin me the link again, just through LinkedIn or my email privately? Yeah.
To the blog post?
Yeah, the blog post you have just shared.
I will do that.
Yep.
Okay. I'll throw it in the chat would that work for you?
Yep.
Oops.
Okay.
Yep, that's it. There it is.
Okay, thanks. 所以今天的话呢，我们请问还有其他的问题吗？ Oh, there is another question. Okay. If I can share, okay. I think it's the question for me. Okay. 对，我会就是在发邮件的话，会把那个故事会以往的视频的话会发给你。对。Okay, so is this possible that you can write a blog post? 对，那个
I just went ahead and put a link in there to answer that question. I did write a blog post on how I did that, and the blog post talks about how I did it, and then at the same time I say why I will never do it again because it's not a very good chart. But yeah, I put the link in there. There's a blog post on how to create it.
Yeah, okay. 我们还有其他的问题吗？ I didn't expect so many people are still staying on the line.
Great, that's awesome.
其实今天实际 Kevin 的话，在4个月之前得了新冠，然后呢，所以大家可能听的时候的话呢，他也会咳嗽啊，或者怎样的哈。那如果是大家没有问题的话呢，那我们今天先结束吗？ I don't think we are expecting any further questions. Yeah, they type in Chinese. Thank you. 谢谢。At least this is the one Chinese word we are learning. Yeah, so I also shared you have just recovered from COVID few months ago. Yeah, so 感谢大家参加，然后呢，也祝大家周末愉快。So thank you, Kevin, and we're really looking forward to have you back again and again and again. If you don't mind, just come back to the Chinese community. Yeah.
I would absolutely love that. That sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
So,
thank you, everybody.
Thank you. And I wish you a Merry Christmas.
Yes, you too. Thank you very much.
Thank you. 好，感谢大家，谢谢，拜拜。
Thank you,
Thank you,
bye-bye.
Kevin.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.